we got a message in the SOC that we got like someone, some third party typing on Teams to someone else. And the person behind the thin client said, yeah, I didn't do it. So we opened up an investigation and we found that, yeah, someone took that thin client and because of a print driver that was vulnerable.
Welcome to the CNL Podcast, where we dive deep into the minds of IT and security professionals to uncover their experiences, challenges, and best practices in today's ever-evolving tech landscape. I'm your host, Sedric Show Up, Show Out Lusant, also known as your cyber expert. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Andrew List, Director of Cybersecurity at OTC Industrial Technologies. Thanks for joining us today, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Sedric. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. So to get started, you want to tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got started in the world of security?
Yeah, absolutely. So my entrance into security happened really in just 2014. I joined a company called Alliance Data. It's now called Brand Financial as their SOC analyst. And from there, I found one of those moments where I go, and when we were working through, it was a DNS sinkhole incident. And I was quarterbacking as an incident responder. And I sort of stepped back for that moment. And I went, is this really what I want to do? And the answer is, yeah, this is really fun. So a lot of security operations in my background went from there to a small burger shop called Wendy's, worked on their blue team and got to do some purple team exercises with them and did a little bit of consulting before I joined OTC in 2022. And just to give a short intro on OTC, what we do, we're one of the largest industrial distributors and service providers in the US. We got about 60 locations, about 40 different brands. So you may not know OTC as a household name, but and you wouldn't know it unless you're sort of in the manufacturing industry. But some of the sub brands you may know a little bit more. And there we started the cybersecurity sort of practice there in 2022. But I came in with a great team that already really got the leg up on it from an IT perspective.
That's awesome.
That's who I am and where I'm coming from.
That's awesome. So was there a specific event or something of inspiration that pushed you towards this field?
I actually, from an education perspective, I went to school to be a photojournalist, nothing in IT and security. I got into an interview with my now wife. She handed me a gig because we were both photographers. That's how we met. So handed me a gig for TF Day for Ohio University. And she thought it was super boring. I actually liked it because it was dealing with and system admin and networking.
Awesome.
So I was photographing this and I ended up sort of taking some of those classes. So then when I went back to school to get my master's, I'm like, photojournalism really didn't work out for me that well, but when I choose again, I want to make sure I choose something that is always in demand. And I thought, and I knew how to network and subnet and, what's not going away. Cybersecurity is not going.
Yeah, it's not going nowhere. And I hear that story quite a lot where the initial major has nothing to do with the field or position that they're in cybersecurity. For me, myself, I started with criminal justice and then realized I want to be behind the keyboard, but I'll take it behind the keyboard. And one of my good friends, Boris Kassler, he started with an accounting degree and now he's one of the world's top hackers. So you can come from any background, and that analytical mindset that he brings from the numbers world allows him to be able to rip things apart.
Every piece of experience counts.
Yeah. Were there any challenges that you faced when you were trying to climb the ladder to get to the director position to where you are now?
There's always all sorts of challenges. I just learning, right? And coming out of school and being, in my 20s and just trying to understand the world, the corporate world in particular, and just learning it. I always read a lot, or, if it wasn't reading, it was listening to something like Audible, some books on tape. Mm-hmm. If your listeners haven't discovered it yet, the cybersecurity canon used to be owned by Palo Alto. They handed it over to OSU. But if you just Google cybersecurity canon, they have a list of books, and I would definitely pay attention to the winners. Those are the ones to go after. But, just keep reading, keep applying those things. Really just keeping your nose clean in the sense of we call them clear conscience Fridays, right? When you're going to work, put an effort out so that way you can thoughtfully walk away from work at the end of the work week on Friday and be confident that you put in 110%. and then you can let it go. And that means you can show up and be there for your family, right? But as long as you give that full effort, then you feel pretty confident going home at the end of the day.
Yep. And I can definitely resonate with that, especially when you become so entrenched with a company to where you're a part of their DNA and their core fabric of business processes and you're securing it. So it's kind of hard not to disconnect sometimes when at any point in time you could get that text message from that honeypot or something. And then it's time to get into action. But, I definitely can understand that. So what does a typical day look like in your current role?
So one is I started a lot of my mornings sort of reading a lot of those sources. So not just like, the books, but, whether it's podcasts, it's the Cyberwire podcast. They have a daily.
I love it. I love Dave. You've heard one of my stories. If you're an avid listener, if you heard all of theirs, you've heard one of my stories that I've recommended, sent over, part of the scam, the daily scam. I love that bit. Love that bit.
And you got the SANS Internet Storm Center podcast with Johannes Ulrich. I gotta give it to him. And he's there in most work days, right? For tens of years. It's been honestly a great thing to listen to. Like when you drove into work, I work from home, but when you drove into work, right, that podcast is going.
Well, traveling on the plane, where I'm going to client sites, we listening to the podcast sometimes. But I got onto Johannes from when he was featured on the Cyberwire with Dave, with Bittner. And yeah, definitely doing some good work over there. So, you start off podcast morning. I hear that. What's midday, end of day look like for you?
I mean, as you kind of get away from those podcasts, you usually touch base with the team. Every other day we have a touch base just to communicate amongst each other. We pass tickets amongst each other. We work out problems. One of the biggest things that I'm a proponent of is go forth and getting stuck is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And then once you do get stuck, that's the reason why we work in a team. And to really bring those problems up and get another pair of eyes on it or get some other experience that you may not have yet. If you go to my LinkedIn, there's this XKCD, like 1 in 10,000, right? You don't know about that thing that someone else does. Great. Today is the 1 in 10,000. Come along on the journey. We get to learn it together. Yeah. So getting stuck is one of those things that we sort of go forth, get stuck, and then we bring it together. And that usually brings us up to whether we're having a meeting on, sometimes we work together on automation, sometimes we work together on threat intelligence, or just problematic tickets.
Yeah.
If we try to have a smaller team on the security side at OTC, and I think bringing them together, that means we're all cross-trained. Any one of us can go out and the other one can cover their duties.
That's good.
I usually have a time block for just focusing and working myself, right? And getting in the zone, putting some music on, knocking something out. And then there's always, touch bases and keeping the chat lively, right? For those things, the team's always going to bring something up that is going on or very security operations leaning, right? There's always, or do we put out any, like if there's a email issue, if there's any compromised users, we got to hop on those right away.
Yeah. Definitely could bouncing around all over the place, fail forward, you get stuck, you got another pair of eyes to look at it. Cause sometimes it just might be, you're looking at a problem from just the wrong context and another fresh set of eyes, like you said, come and get you right through that block that's holding you up and get you going forward. And I definitely hear you on the play music on. I'm a big avid in the office here. I work a lot from home. I got a couple subs, and when it's time to throw some music on and just knock out, whether I'm putting together some script or figuring out business processes or putting together some policies, whatever the case may be, just having that music on. I love working with music. Always gotta, somebody always gotta bring something up. When I get Teams message or Teams call out of nowhere, just like, okay, put the music down. What's up? What we got going on? And, we work through the issue. So right now, being in the manufacturing, there's a lot of threats that you face, but what is the biggest threat that you're seeing right now in your industry? And what are you guys doing to combat that?
I think one of our top ones is still phishing, right? It's one of the ones that a lot of industries face, not just manufacturing. There's one on the threat intelligence side that is really targeting against us. And it's coming up from, so we remember back in 2018, 2019, there's ransomware as a service. Someone will build the software and then they'll hand it off and they'll be like, yeah, for $1,000, you can do it too. Well, the ones that are really after us are phishing as a service. So now that we have the large language models, we got folks that are really creating these great phishing kits that are being sold out there, and then they're leveling their attacks against it. Fight AI with AI is one of the things that we're doing. There's a group of products that use AI and detection models on email. Like, I don't want to name names. There's a couple that I recommend folks to look into, which are like abnormal security, and then I'm trying to think of the other one that they're going to kill me when they this podcast and they go,
no, man, you're good. We give the information out there. If it's a good product that other companies could potentially benefit from, definitely give them a shout out, especially if you're using them firsthand. There's no better testimonial. But so I get it. Phishing, I hear that a lot. From when I ask that to guests, they say it's phishing, and then I know if AI, it's only if turned up. I do a lot of external penetration tests, and part of some of those engagements include phishing. And ever since the release of these large language models, it has helped out tremendously with just figuring out different scenarios that are actually plausible and coming in the same format that users are used to seeing. So it's even harder for teams to rely on the humans to be that human firewall. So what I say is you got to plan for them to fail at some point. It's not saying you're not having no faith in your people. Of course, you're going to take the time to educate them, put the technical controls in place, but you got to have those mitigating controls. And most of the time, it's going to be those technical controls on the back end after they click on it. Is there anything that's opening that link up in a sandbox? Is there anything on that user's endpoint that even if something is ran, it'll prevent the payload from actually fully executing? Things along those lines. Or as most phishing campaigns, just give me your credentials and then I go figure out where I can use them.
Yeah.
Or sign in, man in the middle, and I'll steal your cookies after you're done and then go use it on my system.
So the session stealing has been one of the other ones that we've seen in the last year, where it's sort of, there's a login, but bypassing MFA, and it's definitely out there. If they're handed a session token on Microsoft 365,
there's no MFA at that point. I just drop the token in my browser, and then I have access to everything as you.
Yeah. So taking a strong look at some of those conditional access rules that folks have in their Microsoft 365 environment, that's done wonders for us. But still, it's a little bit later in the kill chain, if you will. And if you already got phished and the user interacted with it, right, you had two opportunities to sort of stop that before we got to that third step of that session token being stolen. We always try and catch it early so that way it doesn't ever build to a bigger problem than it needs to be.
Yeah. The earlier in the kill chain we can get them out is always the better. But like you said, those conditional, like that, having that defense in depth approach where even if they did get their session hijacked, you got that conditional access policy saying they can only log in from certain locations. Like you shouldn't have locations outside of the country, right? That's definitely raised some red flags there. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to other security leaders that are in your space that are battling some of the same issues that you are?
I would focus on the basics. So we conform to CIS for some of our framework for cybersecurity. And I think focusing on that is the 1 and 2, right? What are your assets and what are your software? And make sure that you're doing it correctly. Those are the basics, and they are 1 and 2 for a reason. But it's also, as in my career, I've seen some of the hardest things that people do. It's hard to know and update your assets and be accurate with it. It's hard to update your software and be accurate with it. And just focusing on that. And then as you get into some of the other ones, I find it fun to do investigations.
I love forensics. That's my thing. I love it. I love threat hunting. I love doing forensics. You give me a crumb, you send me some malware. I have a whole folder of people's malware that on my off time, I'll go and figure out where is this back to, if I can get their infrastructure taken down or whatever, because if I can uncover a larger scheme, that's just me. I'm the conspiracy guy. I just found that somebody the other day, I Googled my name, and there's a couple, I don't know if it's a couple threat actors, but there are some threat actor or actors that are using my name as a lure for certain people, for some of the services that I'm known in the industry. And they have whole landing pages set up to basically download a payload and execute on their machines. And it's one based out of some certain countries that are very far, that are not in the U.S. jurisdiction, of course. So it's like, who are you going to report that to?
They're using your name, man. They see that you're up and coming and they want to attach themselves to it, right? So a little bit of flattery, right?
Yeah, yeah. I thought about it that way. I thought about that. I was like, yeah, but it's like, wait, no, because now what if somebody thinks that I have something to do with it? I'm a hacker. I'm an MMA fighter. So it's like, I have all the different sources of traffic. So I see why they're coming. It is definitely a tricky situation to navigate. These bad guys do not care. They will eat your lunch.
They will. They will. So to answer one other part of your question, and because there's a story attached to it, is like what they focus on. System hardening is one thing that I definitely like. I was running an investigation. Not going to say with who. This was before COVID, but we were focused on work at home associates, and we got work home associates, these like HP thin clients that automatically connect back to Sedric's endpoints in the organization. We got a message in the SOC that we got like someone, some third party typing on Teams to someone else, and the person behind the thin client said, yeah, I didn't do it. So we opened up an investigation and we found that, yeah, someone took that thin client, and because of a print driver that was vulnerable, there's a print driver. So I think we know we had a cup vulnerability this last year, and this was cup previously. So they knocked over, the entry point was the print driver, but then VNC wasn't taken off that thin client from a hardening perspective. So once they got root onto the thin client, they were able to turn on VNC. And then with VNC, they could see the screen on everything. They could interact with everything. The point where we kind of looked back behind, and said, what can we do to prevent this in the future? We go, yeah, before we put something out in the field, we need to make sure that it's hardened, right? And part of that definition of hardening is making sure that if you're not using a service, important.
You don't need it.
Yeah, just uninstall it, the full thing. So that was our hard lesson learned on that one.
Yeah, and sometimes some organizations, just from our consulting background of hundreds of organizations, some organizations see the value in it, like how you do, and some don't until they get actually, popped, right? Because they're juggling, I get it. Small teams could be juggling a lot of things when different things are prioritized differently based on the goals of the business, supporting the business, et cetera. But it's very important to just do the fundamentals, like you said. Just focus on the fundamentals, system hardening, make sure you got your user access down, your identity and access management. You have the core foundational areas of cybersecurity, at least somewhat shape, form, with some sort of business processes that have been defined, and that there's a process that people know to follow, right? And is documented. Because if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. Oh, so what's one piece of advice you would give someone that's just starting out, in their IT or a cybersecurity journey, trying to break into the field?
Learn something that you're interested in, right? Be the best person in that niche. You'll find someone else out there that's like you, that's focused on that niche. Don't be afraid to deep dive. Don't be afraid to go after it. I go to a local group that's called DC 614, like DEFCON 614. That's 614 being the local area code here in Central Ohio. The guy said, I'm interested in steganography. He didn't know anything about steganography, but like 2 months ahead, he's like, sign me up. I'm going to do a talk. And I'm like,
you're going back a way to learn.
Yeah, you're going in blind, and you're going to commit to a presentation 2 months from now.
Now
you got to learn it. And so it forced him to go in and learn. It was his way of doing accountability to get in there and learn it, and then come back and he did this whole presentation on like going from 0 to 1 on steganography, right? Here's my journey. Here's what I learned. Here's the resources that I used. Here's the hack the box, things that I went through and tried to solve. And some of them I did, some of them I didn't.
It's awesome.
But it was to see that sort of hunger and for knowledge. Yeah. This person's got the passion and wanted to deep dive into something, if the one topic, and just sort of,
and that's how I feel like throughout, because I've been in the industry for about 2014, it's about the same time as you. And throughout my years, I found myself going on those deep dives into certain domains, like in the cloud, into ethical hacking, networking, hacking web applications, ethical hacking mobile applications, just finding those different niches and deep diving on those specific methodologies. And just you learn that there's so much. Like when you think you know, it's in levels of inception always. So I try to tell people kind of the same thing. Deep dive on something you're interested in, because otherwise it's a lot of information you're going to be learning anyway. So it's matter to be something that you're actually interested in so you don't get burnt out. Right. So what do you think is the most important skills for professionals in this space to develop?
I know that's sort of the cliche answer, but it keeps coming back up, is just being able to translate between the technical and almost speak that risk language, which usually if there's a few different flavors out there on the risk language, but if you can move it towards those dollars and cents, usually the people that are funding you and your program, those are the ones that really give you the best return on investment, right? And I hate to use that term because it's a monetary term, but again, if you're not in those monetary terms, you're not going to do well when you come with your business case of, hey, I need this funding in order to defend this way against these particular adversaries that we see coming up more and more. So we have to be there to adapt to the landscape and communicating that to your leaders to make sure that they're on the same page that, yes, it is something worthwhile, is always going to be something that's needed.
Yeah.
And that's
understandable there, because you don't move the needle if they don't understand you. And what I mean by they, it's anyone who you're talking to, because you got to translate your technical, like you say, your technical terms into the jargon that they understand, whether that be the financial aspect of it or just the low level overview or really high level overview of whatever the risks that you're trying to explain to them to help move the needle. But it's definitely, I feel like that is an underrated skill. And I don't think it's cliche, but it is one of the skills that are most needed, because if your communication is key. If no one can understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, then they won't understand the importance of why are keeping you around, right? Well,
there's no book that I'd recommend in that, there's tons of different models. You got FAIR, there's one that really resonated with me, and it's on that cybersecurity canon. It's how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk.
Mm-hmm.
That one, you'll find it on the cybersecurity canon.
Oh.
It's really good in the sense of, they give examples of quantifying things and just sort of getting on the level with we don't have to can we be off either side and give a middle value that is 90% of the time it's going to land between these 2 points. You got 5% on either side. And if you can start talking in those terms, it really just sort of opens up a different world to you.
Yep. Because when you can put the numbers to it at that point, it's like whoever has to make the decision, they're making a decision with the numbers in front of them. And if they make the wrong decision and it comes up later down the line that they opted not to do something because of X, Y, Z, it could get held against you, especially in court proceedings and stuff like that, knowing that you knew the risk and you knew you had to do it. But if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
When
you were first starting.
Yeah, I wish I deep dived on coding a little bit more than I did. So I can word my way out of a Python script, but I wish I was a little bit more honed on that one going through. I got some, but I wish I was, I wish it was my hammer when I'm looking at all these nails around me.
I definitely can understand you. Over the last few years, I've dived more deeper into coding to solve some of the challenges I've been facing with just my responsibilities or daily tasks, with finding ways to automate things with Python. Python and Bash scripts has been my bread and butter to help make life much easier. These large language models, I'm using ChatGPT to crank out scripts like no tomorrow now, and there's no shame. There's no shame in it. You use it to your advantage and give you a leg up. It won't give you everything. You have to still give it the logic and structure and tell it and refine it. But it is a powerful tool, and I try to explain that to non-technical people and they don't really understand, but it's like Google times 100.
I was at a conference last year, and Ed Sedric, the sales instructor, was talking, and he goes, "All right, how many people have used large language models to help you code?" Everyone's hand goes up in the room. You got 100 hands in the room. He goes, "All right, how many of you have had that script run perfectly the first time?" 90% of the hands could.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it doesn't give you everything, but it gets you the code that you can, if you got some coding knowledge that you can get in there and work with it. And I agree with you, like embrace it. It's not going away.
It ain't going away.
You could embrace it and you can use it, or it's one of those things that you'll need to work on because it's going to be,
You'll get left behind.
Yeah, later in your
you
development.
will get left behind. It's going to be a part of most job descriptions, the ability to understand how to leverage large language models as a part of your daily work task to optimize your productivity. Because the things that you can get done when you're using them, in the right context, right? You can't over rely or you always got to double check, fact check, because these things aren't perfect. These things will hallucinate and tell you the sky is purple when the sky is blue. So you always got to fact check your work, but definitely more times than not, it's getting you where you need to go. So when you're not fighting cyber threats, what are you doing, Andrew?
I got an 8-year-old named Will who likes Legos and Minecraft and playing video games with his dad. I had a proud dad moment because he's really into video games. So he gets on with his friends, and that's how we communicate on these snow days in Ohio. And one of his friends pinged him while in line. And he jumped into the chat real quick. He's like, I'm playing with my dad. And I'm like, oh, man, one of my heartstrings, I made it to the A-list on to play with. So he kicked out a friend and played with me.
Hey, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm trying to get my son to enjoy playing some other sports types game, but he's in the Fortnite era right now. He loves it. He does the same thing. 10 years old. The thing is, like, the video games nowadays versus back when I was a kid, like, now it's so monetized so heavily that the kids are focused on being able to get the points to buy certain downloadable content in order to feel like they're keeping up with the Joneses or being able to have the latest and greatest that other kids are using. And most of the time, some of this DLC does give you an advantage over regular players. Back in the day, you could just play the game and you beat the game, you unlock the levels, you get experience, you get the nice gun, so whatever the case may be. And now it's all, you got to pay to play. But I get it. The video game industry was on its last leg and they had to find a way to survive. So I can definitely understand that. But that's awesome. Awesome. Gaming has been something of a pastime for me. It's helped me get through a lot, especially as a kid when my brother was the middle child. So both my brothers were out the house when I was growing up. So video games, gaming online with other people was one of the biggest things. The Halo days, super valuable all over the place.
Good memories.
Well, that's
good memories.
Good memories. You played Halo?
Oh yeah, there was parties with friends. I still have a group of friends that I get on Friday nights, and these are friends from high school. That I get on with, and we'll catch up. And so it's a mixture between I think we got off this last version of Warzone and Call of Duty. We're like, yeah, I think we're getting a little old, or we're moving objective these things together. But it's one of those things where we came together and we get to catch up, and sometimes we get to call out with that. It's a fun time to sort of awesome. Again separate from work and have some playtime.
Yeah, that's awesome. Every time I try to play with my friends from high school, I think we keep arguing because no one wants to follow the leader. Yeah, and everybody wants to go and scout and do their own things. And then when they get knocked, then they're calling for help. Constantly saving. But when we do get a dub, it's an amazing feeling. But that's awesome. Maybe we'll catch up some games sometime, Andrew. I would definitely love to have you on again on the show. Thank you again for sharing your incredible insights and experience with us today. For our listeners, where can they catch up with you on LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Definitely on LinkedIn. Yeah, shoot me a message. Even if if you're job hunting, job looking, I like to see if I can connect folks along with what their feature sets are. But yeah, drop me a line. Definitely look forward to it. And yeah, Sedric, I'll have to get your gamer tag here, and we'll drop you an invite.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll send that over to you once we are done recording in a second. But for everyone else, don't forget to subscribe to the CNL Podcast for more conversations with IT and security leaders like Andrew. Until next time, stay safe and stay secure.